Welcome to another interview for International Women's Day, which I've turned into International Women's Month. If you've been watching these, you know that I'm interviewing women who inspire me, who I admire, who I love. And today is no different. I'm interviewing Allie Clark, who, for those of you who know me well, you're like, oh, this is Allie. Allie, the elusive Allie who tells me who I say, well, Allie says, Allie thinks I should. So this is Allie. So for all the years I lived in Seattle, most of the years I lived in Seattle, Allie was my therapist and counselor. And since I've moved to Europe, she's been my coach. And so we've stayed in touch over all these years, and she's kind of been along for the ride as I've traveled around the world and gone through all these different experiences. And so she's a partner. Probably the person I talk to most outside of my best friend and my sister. So she's been on the ride with me, and we've gotten to know each other really well over these last, I don't know, are we like at 8 years, something like that? I think.
I think we're at 9. Yeah.
9? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Allie, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and kind of who you are and your journey.
Yeah. I'm Allie Clark. I'm in Seattle currently. I moved here years ago from Texas. So I was raised in the South, two very different cultures. I'm a therapist now, so that makes it interesting. And I have 3 really amazing daughters, 2 older daughters in college who live together, which makes for great stories. And one 11-year-old who, I often learn from you about that age difference in siblings and the youngest and what it's like. So, 2 dogs. There's just a lot of girls around here.
Whole lot,
Uh,
whole lot of girls. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say. I came to this field later. I started grad school at 35. So that's been a wild ride. And I knew I wanted to do it, be a therapist when I was younger.
Mhm.
I don't think I believed in myself enough. I did went the cultural norm route, which was to get your MRS degree out of
Yes.
college, got married, got a master's in something about marriage, and um, had to grow up and then go to grad school and get
Right.
a divorce. And
Which was an education in and of itself, right?
yeah, so I definitely got the education.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I think like having also, I mean, it's as you know, like grown up in sort of a religious family, went to university in the South, did, kind of all of that. I felt like I was the abnormal friend who didn't get married out of a Christian college, right? I was
Uh-huh.
like,
Yeah.
oh, something's must be wrong with me. I didn't get married. Everyone else did,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I totally know that. But yeah, I think every now and then Allie and I are talking and I'll be like, well, being the little sister sometimes feels like this. And she's like, oh,
Yes.
noted. Thank you. Like
Yes, for sure.
the thing. And then sometimes we have to have conversations about having curly hair. So that's also that's also part of the dialogue. So
Yes,
what do
which
I put
each
on
daughter has. Yeah, each daughter more so than I just have some waves, but each daughter has. And so I'm still gonna buy the middle daughter the product you told me about.
Awesome.
We cover all the bases.
Yes, exactly. That's if you know each other for 9 years and you know all these intimate things about each other, you have to share all the details. So totally. I wanted to talk a little bit about having raised your daughters, having come to this career sort of, late, but then building a practice, a practice that thrives in a city that is, sometimes expensive and difficult to live in. But what has kept you moving forward and motivated towards this work when things have been difficult? Because I know that there have been difficulties.
Yeah, for sure. The thing that comes up when you ask that question is there's something in my gut that just won't be quiet. And I don't think I think something about my own healing is that I had to learn to listen to that. We all do, but
Yeah.
I think that there was this turning point when I was about to graduate from grad school. I was getting a divorce. I had just had Emory. All the things were happening in the same year. And when I look back on it, unable to articulate it. Then I look back on it and I think this thing, this like true self, this inner knowing, it had to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think that drives all the directions that we go, right? If we don't listen to it, it drives it. If we are in touch with that, it drives it. And so I think there's just a real push in me or desire in me to always be in touch with that or to let it grow. I don't know if that's making sense or if it's too vague, but
No, I think it makes sense. Like, I would assume that, like most of us, there were times when there were other voices that were competing with that sort of inner knowing.
that was the point of departure from those voices.
Mhm.
Specifically, I remember a friend of mine, we had this opportunity in Washington State to go ahead and start your own practice, even as an associate before you have all your critical hours. And I had 3 daughters I needed to raise by myself, one baby, right? And I it's always a choice, but I couldn't raise them without
Right.
going into private practice. I couldn't
Right.
stay in this city in particular. And I remember a friend in grad school having got that we had gone to grad school together. We'd gone through all the therapy and the personal work and all of that, saying, absolutely not, you can't do it. And thinking, I can't, like, this is in my gut. I'm doing it. Like, I'm already doing it.
Mhm.
And so that was, I think, the first point of departure from the voices, the other voices, being
Yeah.
able to say, it's okay for you to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I have to follow this.
Yeah. And because I talk a lot, as a coach, I talk a lot to people about, like, you have to sort of catch the thought, talk to the thought, decide if it has anything to say. And if it doesn't, you can send it on its way, or, or figure out what it has to, what it's bringing to the discussion. But there is, I think for a lot of us, we get to a stage where there is one voice that's louder and more insistent, right? And it's that, like,
Mhm.
how do you listen to it? How do you follow it?
Right. Because I think that's the same voice that wants to run and hide. Like, if I believe in this person more than I believe in myself, then I can go hide over here and feel very uncomfortably safe, like I have done my whole life, except for it's pretty painful in here.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
the sort of life-giving part comes out when you chase that thing that's like, it's terrifying and I've got to go do it. So, yeah.
I just had a visual of a roller coaster, like in the front car of a roller coaster. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the choice. Yeah.
Totally. For those of you listening, I have acquired a cold, which is making me cough. So I'm muting myself so I don't blast Allie's ears off while she talks. So
You always do that so well.
thanks. I also wanted to talk, so thanks for sharing that, because I think it's important, and I think it kind of leads into this other question. I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, we've certainly talked about it, like COVID, and there's so much war and there's all this political turmoil in the world, but definitely in the US, and there just seems to be a lot of upheaval. I mean, I guess there's always a lot of upheaval, but it feels like the last few years have just been in our
It does.
face
It
upheaval.
does.
And I was curious about, like, for you and your practice and the work you're doing, do you see a difference for women and girls in what they're bringing to the conversation and what they're working on to men who are maybe showing up for you or your colleagues that are coaching and performing, helping patients and really working with them?
Yeah. Yeah. I do. I have some lovely male clients that are, some of my most consistent, engaged clients. And
Mhm.
this might, I don't know if this is how this will sound, but it's just a different conversation, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's the conversation with my women clients has all, Allie, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm sick. And I don't have a choice. I have to do all of this. And so here's the 6 books I've read on self-care and self-help. And I've joined this group and I mean, just hustling,
Yeah.
right? We're hustling and looking for that more, like that, whatever that is driving us is
Yeah.
we're looking. I don't know if men have that permission yet.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly my generation of men, like, and I see that clearly in my practice, is that younger, if I'm working with a woman and she's describing their partnership, and that those younger couples each have their own therapist, and
Right.
then they have a couples therapist, or sometimes a partner will come in to help with his partner's work, like I want to have a glimpse of what this
Mm-hmm.
partnership is like to work on my client's behalf. But the men that are coming in individually and it is generational, I think, in terms of how men have been raised and what they're allowed to talk about, right?
Right.
Those men are starting. One of them has been with me as long as you, and is saying he's stopped asking, why do I need to feel my feelings?
I don't, that's not necessary,
He's
right? Right.
yeah. And one of his common answers is, I'll question him on something he's supposed to do. He's doing, and he'll his answer is, well, I do that because I'm supposed to. And great, just like you, we have great banter, and I'll say, oh, you're supposed to, huh? And why? you know um and so permission to dive in, it seems to be something that these men are seeking,
Mhm.
um in their way, in my practice, but they're very different conversations,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think about, I've had a lot of these conversations now. And one of the things I was talking with someone about is like, as we as women show up more of ourselves in the corporate space and in these different dynamic spaces, if we'll stop pretending to be men and
Mm-hmm.
show up and be ourselves, not only will we get permission to be seen and validated, they'll get permission to be themselves
Mm-hmm.
because the structure is also set up so that they have to be performative in a different way.
Right,
And
exactly.
they have to fit this persona. We feel sort of
Uh-huh.
squeezed into the persona, but we sort of discount the fact that there are probably a lot of men who also feel squeezed into the persona,
Yeah,
who
I
wish
I
that they
keep
could.
seeing that more and more over
Mhm.
the last few years. It's like
Yeah.
there are a lot of great voices on. I've seen them on TikTok. I've seen them on Instagram. Warrior Men. Can't remember the names of them, but there's some really good voices out there for on behalf of men, and um, I find myself drawn to those as I keep thinking about, well, what does it mean for us to be fully woman, right? In any of these spaces, and what do I need to know about men and their roles, their expectations, their all that they've brought to the table,
Yeah. Yeah.
or pushed under the table because they weren't allowed to bring.
Right. Well, and I think I mean, it shows up in some of the conversations I know you're having with me and others, like, as a nearly 50-year-old woman who's dating again, I'm like, these are the men in my pool. I want them to be able to say, this is what I want, this is who I want, this is how I feel. And a lot of them just can't. They just
Right.
don't have access to it. And I'm like, listen, I am too old to parent you.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have
Mm-hmm.
the patience. Like, and I think that's also part of the problem is that those of us who are that age, who have been, I'll say it for myself, having been in the corporate space, I've already played this game with a bunch of men where I've had to be a different type of person and show up so that they could accept what I needed to say. So then I'm not gonna, I feel really, really boundaried around, like, I'm not doing that in my personal life. And yet
Yeah.
these are the men who are out there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And figuring out, like, what can I bring that is me, and how can I
Yeah.
at least be understanding of who they are and where they're
Yeah.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, you hear in that your openness, your curiosity, that's beautiful. And that's what I think is, I know this is about women, but in
Yeah.
dating is probably one of the hardest things that we talk about in my office.
Yeah.
these days. More in the last couple of years, it's just profound because there's so much harm. There's so much hurt and there's so much harm that happens in dating. And that's not, if that's happening, then, something's wrong.
Right.
with
I mean, I think about that from in the perspective of like, it's one thing to have trauma and go into a corporate environment and get triggered and be like, "Ooh, I need to find somewhere else to work. I need to do something differently." But then when you realize like that also shows up in the dating world, it shows up in building friendships, and you're just like, "Oh, it's everywhere. I've got to work on this And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
having awareness and being like, "Listen, we're all in this, and we did this
Mm.
together." So, yeah.
Right. I see that. And I also, I see that there can be really clear boundaries for us that I'm going to bring my openness and curiosity to this. That's what I know you're trying to do in the dating process. And I really like what happens in me, I engender, right? I will attract reciprocal mutual relationship by being that within myself.
Yeah.
That's what the goal is. So I think that there's a real deficit of openness and curiosity,
Mhm.
and that we have to look at what are our assumptions in any of these settings. So if it's in a corporate setting, the work setting, what are my assumptions that I'm operating under,
Yep.
and get curious, like get more curious. Why is that the assumption? Are there any other assumptions? Like,
Right.
so be clear on our assumptions and be really curious um, with others. And I wish we could see that in more men
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So
And
similar,
there's
but a slightly different bend on this, because you're raising young women, but also I know you work with some younger women as well. Like, what do you see that younger women are facing that we in like our generation could actually step in and help them with? Like, be there
Mhm.
for them and make them feel seen. Like, is it different? Is it the same? Like what are you seeing?
Like different from what we
Yeah,
might
I
have
guess
struggled
like,
with at their
yeah,
age.
yeah.
Yeah. I Why do they all think they have to know how to do things they've never done? Like they're so afraid to get on the phone and talk to people.
Right,
And that's okay.
right,
That's normal,
right.
actually. I think, there are all these jokes and all of this banter on TikTok about Gen X. And so I do take that to heart. Like, we kind of just did things without thinking, and that didn't always go well.
Right.
Right. And
We were in
now
a
we
lot
have,
of danger, a lot of times.
we
We were in
were.
danger all the time at Gen X, right? And
Right.
I'm like, we don't need to make them like that. They don't need to be in
No,
danger.
it's
Like,
great that they're thinking. This is a foundational skill. Um, but I think with all of their exposure to social media and the comparison mindset, that there are some really fear-based, rigid assumptions about what they should already know.
yeah,
And and that doesn't leave a lot of space uh, mentally to be open,
right,
right? To go, oh, I don't know how to do this. Let me
right,
see. Let me ask this question. Let me ask that question. Right.
right.
I got off the phone with my daughter after she was going to take out a small school loan. This actually worked out well. Um, and she had to set up her credit union account for it. So she got on the phone with the person. I said, I can't do it. You have to do it.
Do
And
it.
um, she was texting me, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't like this at all. And I thought, okay, that's normal, right? Um, I feel that way and I'm 50, right? I
Right.
date. Um, so, we hung up and she hung up with the person and called me back and I said, you did a great job. Like, you don't have to know. You can ask a question on the phone. She returned the loan and has now saved enough to pay for her house for next year. She just doesn't want to do it
She's
again.
like, no,
So
thanks. I'm not doing that. That's so funny.
So that anxiety worked well on her
Yeah,
behalf,
that
but
worked out, created a different kind of independence. Like, I'm not doing that ever again. Yeah, totally, totally.
uh,
Well, and I wonder, like, for us, like, like the young women in my life, and I see them like asking me questions like, how did you know it was okay to just like move to Europe. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I was 41. Of course, who's going to stop me? They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
but who did you ask? And I'm like, no one, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I told my friends and I got people's opinions, but it's
Yeah.
that agency teaching them like the agency is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
but if you need help, you can ask for it, but also take a risk, do a thing. You don't have to know how to do it, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're taking me back because I'm thinking of um how important all those noisy voices
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah.
Like really they felt like something that I couldn't have a sense of self without it.
Right.
And so I mean, can you think? I mean, today I just think of what a circus, right? I'm like, I'll do this, and then this, and like I'm stretched in all these different directions for what? Like, I can't hear my own voice.
Right.
It's just so much, it's so much nicer to
Yeah.
get to go inward
Yeah.
and say, well, this is what I'm doing. It could be wrong, it
Yeah.
could be wonderful.
Right.
I will be the one who bears the
Concept.
outcome and
Exactly.
navigates it when it does happen.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah,
for me, and I think this is one of the things I tell my niece, and, once you've done it once, once you've done that brave thing once, the next time you'll be like, I know how to get myself out of this. Let me take a chance. Like,
right.
as hard as like moving to Stockholm was from Seattle, moving from Stockholm to Berlin was hard, but not as hard. Moving from
Yeah.
Berlin to here, not that hard, right? Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I know how to get out of this if I screw it up.
Right. Right.
And so it just
You
becomes
will be
this,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know what to do, right? And the voice that, to your point, like there were lots of noisy voices when I was being offered the role to move to Stockholm, both external voices coming at me, but also the internal voices. And the voice that cut through was the one that said, if you don't do this now, you'll never do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So decide if that consequence is worth it. Are you
Yeah.
okay with 10 years from now looking back and being like, should have tried? And I
Yeah.
wasn't. And it was the voice that I was like, well, that's the one.
Mhm.
So,
And so to go forward from that point, you had to be able to say, I don't know what this is going to look like down here at this exit, but
mm,
today I need to pack up my garage, you
right.
know?
Yeah.
And then that's where it becomes step by step. And you're doing something. I remember sitting in grad school going, am I really going to be a therapist?
Really
I
gonna,
mean,
yeah.
here, this is the intent. There's
Yeah.
was 4 years and it happened, but it didn't feel like it was going to happen.
Right. No, totally. I mean, I have a coaching practice and every day I'm like, am I really going to be just a coach? Is that what I'm going to do? And I'm like, that's what you're doing. What are you talking about? It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
an if you do it. This is happening. This is what you do today. Oh, okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So even that doubt can sneak in while we're in the middle of it. So,
Right. Right.
so my last question is the question I've asked for every single person so far. If you were giving younger Allie some advice based on what you know
Mhm.
now that might be beneficial to those who are listening, what would you say?
Just popped in when you asked. I trust you. It would
Mm,
be I trust you. Like I had people start to tell me that during the grad school journey. I was doing my personal work. I was getting real, listening to myself. And they would say, I trust you. I didn't ask. What? You
right.
know, it was the first time there was this mirror in front of me. Yeah, I'm sure the mirror neurons were like taking hold here. Like, okay, you trust me? Okay, yeah.
Right.
Uh, What's happening here? Um, so I think I would want that for my younger self, just to be able to see in the face, the reflection of my face. You got this. I
Yeah.
trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
I
that.
trust you. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's, I think I've told you that one of the primary things I see among my clients is that they've somehow lost that trust of themselves and they need somebody to say, here's what I hear, here's what's going
Yeah.
on. Can you trust that? Yeah, maybe. Like, yeah,
It
okay.
really, it makes me wonder too, as you say that, is they've lost it. I wonder if they've ever had it. There's that,
Mhm.
it's that nugget inside our gut, right? Like where you had some trust in yourself, and you also have all these noises around you. And so you have some kind of amalgamation here of trust, or it's something
Yeah.
that's called trust. But then developing that, things start to slough off, like
Yeah.
outside voices. And then this trust gets like shiny, it gets prettier
Yeah.
and louder. And so that is a new kind of trust,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
That develops.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's developing in those of us who have permission and are looking for, I think we're all meant for abundance. No matter where we are today, we're all meant for something more.
Yeah.
Uh, right where you are, there's also something more.
Yeah. No, I love that. I do. I love that. And I think you probably can't, I'm just based on what you just said, like, I think we often can't access the abundance if we can't get to the place of trusting ourselves, because we'll stay small and I can only have this. Whereas if you
Yeah.
start to go, oh, well, maybe I could have that. Maybe that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
You lean into it and then the space opens up and you're like, oh, that is mine to have. Yeah.
Right. And see, what you need in that is the permission to be wrong. Like,
Right.
oh, I could be wrong. Don't do it. Or, oh, I could be wrong. Let's find out.
Right. What's the worst that could happen? You could end up right back here,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Well, thanks for letting me interview you. This was
You're
fun.
right.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
That's
Um, so I will just point out that below us on this little screen, there is a QR code where you can donate to the Malala Fund. The Malala Fund helps women and girls get education in places where they have traditionally not had access, and helps them get leadership education so that they can build some of the skills we've been talking about today, trusting themselves, leading others, and helping others grow and meet their potential and get abundance. So if you'd like to donate, feel free to grab the QR code and send some money their way. Thanks again, Allie. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.